It's Tom Baker's first story, and he's hugely impressive right from the start, dominating the screen through sheer force of charisma. His post-regeneration trauma is minimal compared to that of other Doctors, and mostly manifests in him being slightly quirkier than he would eventually become. There seems to be a deliberate attempt to have him act differently to Jon Pertwee, taking the back seat in situations where Pertwee would have taken charge. He does have a good rapport with the Brigadier, as well as Sarah Jane, and the viewer is left in no doubt that the show is in good hands. The actual storyline is nothing special, and feels mostly like a rejected script from the Avengers TV series, with a sinister fascist group trying to take over the world with the help of a giant robot. And for once the robot is extremely impressive, beautifully designed and with an impressive acting performance behind it. Michael Kilgarriff makes it seem quite sympathetic, and the story becomes kind of a cross between King Kong and Frankenstein. Admittedly, the effects aren't quite as good when it grows to giant size in episode 4, but you can't have everything. The human villains are also memorable. Patricia Maynard as Miss Winters is a rare female villain for this age of Doctor Who, and comes across as a prototype for Margaret Thatcher. Edward Burnham as Professor Kettlewell is the image of a bumbling mad scientist. It's meant to be a twist that he turns out to be evil, but he gives the exact same performance before and after, so it doesn't really make much of a difference. And Ian Marter joins the cast as Harry Sullivan, though he doesn't really have time to make much of an impression in this story. Overall, it's a fine showcase for Tom Baker's talents, and a fun story to kick off his era. 7. The first episode of this is one of the best single episodes of Doctor Who so far, with the Doctor and companions exploring an abandoned space station and slowly uncovering its mysteries. It's very atmospheric and provides a great opportunity for the new TARDIS team to bond. Once the Ark's inhabitants start to revive, the atmosphere quickly turns to horror. The idea of the Wirrn laying its eggs in human bodies and slowly taking them over is absolutely horrifying, even though the alien costumes themselves haven't aged quite as well. The ending is a bit rushed. As soon as the Wirrn have been dispatched, the Doctor and his companions immediately beam down to Earth for the next story, which all feels rather too hasty. As well as horror, there are more science fiction elements present than before. Robert Holmes takes things to a whole new level, with a renewed emphasis on world building, building up the backstory of the Ark and later the Wirrn with impressive detail. The language of the colonists is also full of unique expressions hinting at a wider society, and the set designs are excellent, particularly the curving corridors and the hibernation chambers. Wendy Williams is possibly the most impressive guest star. As Vira, she starts out deferring to Noah, but by the end of the story she has to step up and become the leader of the colonists. Kenton Moore as Noah is perhaps a bit over the top at times, but he does manage to sell the struggle between his human and Wirrn sides in the scenes where it counts. And Ian Marter gets a lot more to do as Harry this time around, using his medical skills in several scenes, and also building a rather good double act with Tom Baker. Overall, it's a fine blend of science fiction and horror that may well have influenced the Alien films, and it takes the series to a whole new level. 9. At only 2 episodes long, this makes for a nice change of pace between the 2 epics on either side of it. The Dartmoor location is very scenic, and it's fun to see the Doctor, Sarah and Harry wandering around like tourists. Once Styre appears, which thanks to the title is hardly a surprise, the tone suddenly becomes a lot grimmer, with numerous scenes of torture. The Doctor challenging Styre to a fight seems rather out of character, like something that was probably written for Jon Pertwee. And the ending feels like a bit of an anticlimax. The Sontaran invasion is foiled, but there's nobody living on Earth anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference. Despite being played by the same actor, Styre is much less three-dimensional than Lynx was. Here he's just a nasty scientist out to torture innocent people for his own sadistic pleasure. And to be fair, he does play the part very well. The robot also looks impressive, although not remotely scary. Overall, it's a quick and easy watch, but with very little substance. 6. This is just on a completely different level than to some of the other stories of the same era. Writing, directing, acting, even the lighting are all at the highest possible standard. And the scope is huge, with more sets and more characters than any story since the War Games. Everyone involved is giving it their all, and it makes you fall in love with the show all over again. Despite being a Dalek story, they are only used very sparingly, only making fleeting appearances, and gradually getting closer and closer to their final form at every stage. But the threat of what they will become is repeated throughout, and as a result they feel a lot more menacing than they have in years. The brutality of war is an ongoing theme. Both Khalids and Thals are depicted as brutal and desperate, and very few on either side come off as sympathetic, and those that do are usually killed off very soon. There are some memorable guest actors here. Michael Wisher as Davros has to be one of the greatest Doctor Who villains of all time, with a very effective mask and a chilling performance as the amoral scientist. Peter Mars as Nyder is almost as good, managing to convey a hint of emotion behind his cold exterior, so you can almost believe him when he pretends to betray Davros to the rebels. The regulars are also at the top of their game. Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah manages to organise a slave revolt despite being clearly exhausted, and the scenes of her climbing the rocket are very well acted. And in only his fourth story, Tom Baker gives one of his best ever performances, with countless memorable lines which have been quoted endlessly ever since.
No tea, Harry. Yes, and that's when our troubles really begin. Do I have the right? If I trust these two wires together, millions of sentient beings will die. But do I have the right, oh bugger?
Overall, one of the finest Doctor Who stories ever made. At nearly 50 years old, it still stands up in just about every detail, apart from the giant clams. But never mind, it still gets 10. This was the only Cyberman story to air throughout the whole of the 1970s, and you can definitely see why. The Cybermen don't even show up until the end of episode 2, and when they do, they're just treated as generic bad guys. They still look great, but there's no mention of converting humans, and the lack of emotion has gone out the window. So they could be any villains, really. We also have the Vogons, who, as well as writing bad poetry, also have really ugly masks, which makes it hard to even look at them, never mind tell them apart. And the whole story is just a waste of great actors such as Michael Wisher and Kevin Stoney. On the plus side, the location filming in Wookiee Hole Caves looks really good. There's even a river with little boats speeding around, but it does make it even more obvious when they switch back to the studio sets. Overall, it's a big disappointment and a waste of a classic villain. 3. So that was Tom Baker's first season, and on the whole it was hugely enjoyable. Although the quality of individual stories varies as much as it ever has, the central trio are always highly watchable, with Tom Baker unpredictable and charismatic as ever, while Elizabeth Sladen and Ian Marter are a solid backup. Their scenes together have a kind of brother-sister banter going on, which is highly entertaining. Having all the stories follow on from one another is a nice idea, although it does make you feel that all the characters must be exhausted and in need of a good meal by now. But they've still got at least one more adventure before they can finally have a rest. Speaking of which, I'm not sure what form my review of Terror of the Zygons will take. Reviewing 5 stories in one video is a lot of work, and the next 2 seasons have 6 or 7 stories in them, which is just ridiculous. I did think about maybe reviewing half a season at a time, but then I'm not sure what the title of those videos would be. But right now I'm leaning towards just reviewing 1 story per video from now on. Obviously the videos will be a bit shorter, but hopefully I can go more in depth, maybe even reviewing some of the DVD extras as well. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget, if you press that subscribe button, you'll see all my Doctor Who reviews, whatever form they may take. See you soon.